Today, we are interviewing Judith Meadows, who is the director of the State Law Library of Montana. Judy, I believe those watching or reading this interview would like to know a little bit about you personally. For example, could you begin by telling us about where you were raised and about your family, both when you were young and today? Then perhaps could you tell us about your education, including where you went to college and then to library school?
I'd be happy to. I was, although I was born in South Carolina, my family moved very quickly when I was still an infant. My father eventually took a job with Ford Motor Company that took us to Michigan, where I lived from the time I was 5 until the time I graduated from high school. I grew up as the middle child between two brothers, and I think that is one reason why I've always been fairly competitive and trying to hold my own against two strong male characters in my family. I went to college in Ohio. It was my father at that point was dean of the business school at the University of Michigan. Didn't want to have anything to do with a Michigan school. So I went to Muskingum for 2 years, and I had a boyfriend who was at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. I transferred to American University for my junior and senior years of college. Then got married when I was 21. Moved to California, where I started law school at Hastings. And my husband was had his first naval duty there as a submarine officer. We traveled a lot, moving back and forth from coast to coast. And I think one of the reasons why our marriage didn't survive was because I was never with him very long. But had a wonderful daughter when I was very young. I was 22. And a wonderful son who joined our family when I was 26. When I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, raising these small children, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Do I want to go back and finish law school? At that point, I thought, no, I'm probably never going to want to practice. What else could I do with my desire to do research and my fascination with how people find information and apply it? So I got a master's in legal studies from the University of Maryland and talked to a professor. And I asked him, what else can you do with that? And he said, well, you could be a law librarian. And I didn't really know what that was, but I was game for it, and I went to library school at the University of Maryland. Had a short-term job with Baker and Hostetler downtown D.C. Then I went to Aspen, the publishers, where I was the corporate law librarian for 3 years, and then I went to Fairfax County in Virginia for 3 years as a county librarian. So that was the beginning of my career. From D.C., we decided that the call of the West was very strong, going back to a small town where we could make a difference in a community. And my job as the state law librarian of Montana was made to order, and we've been very happy ever since, and that was almost about 28 years ago.
I remember when you and I were both in D.C. and you moved out here to the West, and now that I'm visiting you today making this video, I look around and I can see what the attractions are obviously very great.
But Pat, I'll tell you, when we announced that we were going to move, half of our friends thought we were going to drop off the face of the earth. They knew that my husband and I loved museums and concerts and plays, and we went to the Kennedy Center whenever we could get cheap tickets, and and they thought there was no culture out here. And the other half of our friends were so jealous that we had the nerve to try this, because Montana had this panache then of being open to ideas and beautiful country and clean environment. And well, we decided if we didn't like it, we could try something else. But we fell in love with it from the minute we arrived.
Well, you've certainly done an awful lot, and in fact, you've been what would be very aptly described as a major leader in the law librarianship field. You've served as treasurer of the association and later as its president, and other roles besides that. Could you tell us a little bit about some of these activities and perhaps some that you've had with the state court and county law library association?
Certainly. Well, when I was elected treasurer, I had already served as chair of the state court and county law library's special interest section. I had been president of Westpac, which is the chapter that I belong to, and I'd also been president of the Northwest Consortium of Law Libraries. I was lucky to join the board of AALL at the same time that Kay Todd and Mark Estes were there. And Kay had a vision of, she knew that we had to do strategic planning. And when she and I talked, we decided, why not do financial planning for the association, which had never been done. And we had a wonderful small committee. We met frequently and worked hard for a year, and we developed the first financial plan with the first financial policies for the association. And I think that those have put us in good stead ever since. That now, whenever there's extra money, it goes into a current reserve fund. We never spend more money than we have. And we also, one of the things that we put into place was to do a risk assessment of all activities that generate revenue for the association. And we don't overcommit based on a false assumption that we're going to have 3,000 people at an annual meeting, for instance. So I'm very proud of that. I served with wonderful people, including you, when I was on the board as both treasurer, and when I had a year off and I came back as the vice president, and that's when you were immediate past president, and had the wonderful fortune of working with Frank Hodek for 2 years, who became a very, very close friend. And I think that's one of the things that I probably treasure the most about my work on the board, are the friendships, the lasting friendships that you make. And I don't think most of our members really understand that. And it's because you go through some fairly tough times, as you very well know. You make hard decisions on behalf of the members, and you do it together. And you face budget crunches together, and you figure out how to get out of holes, and you deal with some real challenges in the publishing industry. You do that as well as you can, and it holds us together. And since I went off the board, I've been lucky to be involved in some things that have made the association even healthier. I chaired the group that created the competencies of law librarianship, which was something that we still are using. I chaired a group that sped up the election process of officers so that people didn't have to wait until May to know if they were going to be on the board or not. Now we do our electing in the fall, and people have plenty of time to prepare for that. I've served as chair of the nominations committee. I've been on the government relations committee. I've been on the awards committee. I've been lucky to be involved in all of the major things that our association does. And it's been very, very rewarding to me. And when you work on those committees, you get to know even more people. The people who are just coming up in the association, and you can recognize new leaders. I was asked by President Ann Fessenden to create a leadership program for our association, because she knew that I was concerned that the same old people were doing the same things, and we needed new, vigorous leadership to come up. And I think we have a good leadership program now, not just mentoring that happens for a few days during the annual meeting, but a program that happens all year long.
You've done a lot, obviously, and continue to do a lot for the association and the profession. Do you have any thoughts for those who are going to be assuming leadership over the next few years? Anything that they should be focusing on, or
Well,
something of that sort?
I may sound like a broken record, but I think one of the jobs of people on the board is to recognize where the next leaders are going to come from. When people serve on the board, particularly officers, do a lot of traveling. They go to chapter meetings and they go to other things. And I think they should be always on the lookout for people who are doing active things at the chapter level, people who are very, very active in SISs. The health of the association is new blood and bringing new people in, and we should never lose track of that. I think it's also very important for the officers to be in touch with the rest of the board. The president is only one person, and if the rest of the board doesn't know what's going on, then everybody is a loser. Patience, understanding that we have almost 5,000 members who all have different needs and wants and desires, and you must never forget that you have to explain and explain and explain again why we do things and why we spend our resources the way we do, and that they have an opportunity to participate in the decisions that the board makes in a myriad number of ways.
Thank you, Judith Meadows, for allowing us to visit with you here in this wonderful setting at your home, and for taking a few minutes to share about yourself and about your thoughts on the profession. Before closing, however, I want to ask you if there's anything else that you would like to say at this time.
Well, I think one thing that has made my career as rewarding as possible is that I have always taken advantage and have volunteered to work with our groups that affect law librarianship. Therefore, I'm very active in our bar association here in Montana. I serve on several of their committees. For the Supreme Court, I've been appointed to 4 different boards and commissions, and I have chaired the Commission on Self-Represented Litigants for the past 12 years. And that is something that is very near and dear to my heart. Anybody who is watching this video knows that public law libraries have been inundated by self-represented litigants for a good 8 or 10 years now. And everything that we can do to help them, because they cannot afford attorneys, it's to everybody's good. And I firmly believe that everybody would be better off represented by attorneys. But the fact is, if you live in a state like Montana that has only 3,000 attorneys, they're not going to get them. Even if every attorney did the maximum number of pro bono work, there still wouldn't be enough to go around when almost 30% of the population would qualify for legal aid. But our legal aid office now has 9 attorneys for the entire state. So that's something that's very close to my heart. I've served on the Continuing Legal Education Board for a long time because educating our new attorneys is very important to me. I go around the state and I teach public librarians about how you access the law and how they can be our partners in getting legal information to people. And I always have my eyes and ears open for what other people are doing and see how can I copy that here. I don't very often have original ideas, but I recognize other people's good ideas and I steal from all the time.
I think we've all done a certain amount of that over the years, and it's probably to everyone's benefit.
Yeah. And another thing I think, and then I look back over close to 35 years in the profession, I've never been afraid of trying something new. I've always grasped the latest technology and thought, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, so what? We may have lost a few dollars, but most of the time they've been successful ventures. And when I was in library school, Pat, we had to take a computer class at the University of Maryland. And we had to write out a computer program in COBOL. We had to march down to the computer center and punch out our program on a key punch got our cards, and we would punch out our program, and we would hope it would run, and if it didn't, you didn't know if the problem was with your data or your program. So I've gone from that to seeing the internet come in and how it has harnessed the power of librarianship. I had a librarian who worked for me, retired a few years ago, and every time I would say, when I would propose that we digitize something or we make a process easier or make it more readily available from our website, she would say, well, they won't need us anymore. And I said, of course they'll need us, because we're the ones who make it possible. It's librarians who put the information on the web, and it's up to us to make sure that it's authentic and reliable. But I'm glad I was not afraid of change and progress, because I have a phenomenal library, and we have a wonderful reputation in the state. I have people who like working there and love what they do. And we're just all excited about not just the present, but the future.
That sounds very wonderful. I'm sure you've had a very interesting career, as many of us in the field have. And of course, there's been a period of tremendous change.
Yes.
And that continues.
Uh-huh.
And I have been told that we're going to see even more change than anything we've seen in the past.
I know.
Which should make it very exciting.
And I hope I won't sit in the background saying, well, it was good enough when we did it. I hope I won't be that kind of person.
Oh, I suspect you will be far from that kind of person, Judy. Thank you for participating today in this interview.
Thank you, Pat.